They speak of things that haven't happened yet. They whisper of futures not yet born, and recall memories from before they themselves existed. They say the singing never stops, it hums like a heartbeat at the back of their skulls, a lullaby they can't escape. Always the singing. Always. Bo found the photograph first, an old, curling image buried deep in the Historical Society's forgotten storage. Terrebonne Parish had a museum once, a place of dust and silence that no one visited anymore, a mausoleum for artifacts from the old days. We smuggled it into my office, away from curious eyes and eager ears. The wax cylinders we uncovered were fragile, thin as old bones, but most could still speak if coaxed. The first one came alive with a voice, my grandfather's voice. Younger than I'd ever imagined him, yet carrying the weight of authority only the badge could give. September 5, 1947. This is Sheriff Eugene Tibido. I am documenting the testimony of those who have returned from what the old folks call the collection. The state police have ordered me to cease this investigation. But I believe future generations will need to hear this truth. And then, a shift. Another voice emerged. A woman. Young. Frail but unbroken. My name is Adelaide Brossard. I was taken on August 15th. I remember walking into the water, not pulled, not forced. Walking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The singing woman, she isn't solid. She's made of sound and water and time. She showed us the true history of this place. Not the history in books, but the history buried in mud, in the roots, in the bones of everything that's ever died here. Adelaide's voice painted things my mind couldn't hold. Images that made no logical sense, yet rang true in that deep, ancient part of the brain that still remembers we came from water. She spoke of cities hidden beneath the swamp, older than any human hand. Of ceremonies that bound land and water together in balance. And always, always, of recording. Recording. Remembering. Keeping the stories alive. The second cylinder. It was cracked, its grooves damaged, but we coaxed out fragments. A man's voice, speaking first in French, then Creole, then something older still. He recited names. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Some I recognized, old Terrebonne Parish families. Others were Spanish, Native American, African. And some were not human at all. Then came the third cylinder, and Bo, who never spooks, stepped back and crossed himself. It was singing. The same singing we'd heard faintly in the background of Tyler's recordings, but clearer. Closer. Direct. It wasn't music as we know it. The tones didn't follow any scale. The rhythm was irregular, but hypnotic, like waves lapping against a dock at midnight. I leaned closer to the photograph on my desk, as if the image itself held the answer. I wanted to hear more, to understand words that weren't words at all. Then Bo's hand gripped my shoulder. Sheriff, your nose. I touched my face. Blood. I hadn't even noticed. We stopped the recording. The journal continues. September 20th, 1947. All 17 have returned. Physically, they appear unharmed. Dr. Leffett can find nothing wrong, but they are changed. They know things they shouldn't. Young Adelaide Brossard speaks languages she never learned. Robert Tibido, no relation, predicts the weather with perfect accuracy 3 days out. They all speak of recordings they must make, stories they must preserve. Most disturbing, they speak of the next collection. They say it will come when the waters are warmest, when the barriers are thinnest. They say it will happen in the lifetime of my grandson. I have no grandson yet, but they speak as if it's already written. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of predestination press into my bones. My grandfather had known. Somehow, he had known I would be sitting here, reading this, living the same story he had. October 31st, 1947. The final entry. The returned had gone back to their lives. But the town knew they were different. Some people avoided them. Others sought them out for their strange knowledge. Adelaide Brossard had begun painting impossible shapes, geometries that hurt the eyes but which, she claimed, mapped the parish's true shape. Robert Tibido had started a fishing business that never failed, as if he knew where the fish would be before they did. Sometimes, the 17 gathered, always during the full moon. They stood waist-deep in the water and sang that old song, the one from the recordings. And when they did, things happened. Fog rising on clear nights. Animals thought extinct moving in the shadows of the swamp. The dead glimpsed walking, though no one filed official reports. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. I am hiding these recordings for whoever comes after. The state police have classified everything. Threatened my job if I continue. But this will happen again. The singing woman told them so. And when it does, someone will need to know the truth. This is not a crime to solve. This is a cycle to complete. The Bayou remembers everything. And every few generations, it needs new voices to sing its memories back. The phone rang. It broke the spell of the past. Marie Guidry's voice trembled through the line. Sheriff. Tyler's back. He just walked out of the swamp, casual as Sunday morning. Beau and I rushed to Marie's house. Tyler sat on the porch, muddy but uninjured, staring at the swamp with the same empty expression I'd once seen on Josephine's face. His grandmother clutched him, crying, but he didn't seem to notice. I crouched. Tyler, I said softly. Can you tell us where you've been? He turned. His eyes, God help me, his eyes reflected light like an alligator's. Not all the time, just when the angle caught them right. Recording, he said simply. We've been recording the true names of everything. Did you know Terrebonne Parish isn't really called that? That's just what you call it. Its real name takes 17 minutes to say and includes the sound of every creature that's ever died in its waters. Tyler, your grandmother's been worried sick. He blinked at Marie, as if seeing her for the first time. Mama, you look older. How long has it been? 2 weeks, baby. You've been gone 2 weeks. No, Tyler whispered, shaking his head. No. It's been much longer. We've been recording for. He stopped, confusion flickering across his face. Time moves different down there. Sideways sometimes. We recorded the founding of New Orleans, but also its ending. Both happened. Happening. Will happen. The FBI arrived. Agents barreled in from New Orleans the moment they heard Tyler was back. Agent Donnelly immediately demanded to take Tyler for questioning. But I stood firm. This is still my jurisdiction. And this boy needs medical attention first. We brought him to Terrebonne General Hospital. Dr. Isabelle Hebert, whose own great-aunt had been one of the 17 in 1947, examined him. Physically, Tyler was fine. Better than fine. His chronic asthma was gone. An old football injury to his knee healed. Even his acne had cleared. It's like his body's been reset to optimal health, Dr. Hebert murmured, bewildered. But Sheriff, his brain scans. They show activity in regions that should be dormant. Parts of the brain we don't fully understand. Is he in danger? I don't think so. If anything, he's enhanced. But enhanced for what purpose? I couldn't say. Over the next 3 days. All 17 missing persons returned. Each walked out of the swamp at a different place, unharmed, but changed. They described impossible things with flat, matter-of-fact voices. And their phones kept filling with new recordings, even after they'd returned. I gathered them all at the community center, despite the FBI's protests. They wanted to separate, interrogate, break them down. But I had read my grandfather's journal. This was bigger than crime. The 17 stood in a perfect circle without being told. Their spacing exact, their breaths synchronized. When they spoke, sometimes one began a sentence and another ended it, as if one mind moved through many bodies. The collection is nearly complete, Amy Duppy said. 3 more recordings, then the cycle closes, continued Robert here. The water will rise, but not to destroy, added Josephine. To remember, Tyler finished. Every flood is just the bayou trying to return to its original shape before humans changed it. Agent Donnelly stepped forward. You're saying you can predict floods? 17 heads turned as one, eyes locking on him. Not predict, they said in eerie unison. Remember. The water remembers everything. Every storm. Every flood. Every drought. We're just helping it organize its memories. I thought of all the recordings, all the stories they'd been feeding into their phones. You're creating an oral history of the bayou, I said quietly. But not from the human perspective. Tyler smiled, the first real smile since his return. Exactly, Sheriff. Your grandpa understood. He was one of us after all. One of you. One of the collected. It changes you, being part of the song. You carry it forever. Pass it down. Why do you think the Tibido family's been sheriff here so long? The bayou needs someone who understands. Someone to stand between two worlds. That night, I went home. Opened my grandfather's old desk, the one that had been my father's, and now mine. There, hidden in a compartment I'd never noticed, lay another wax cylinder. And a note. For my grandson Claude. When the time comes, the collection must be completed, but it must also be contained. You are the bridge. You must ensure both worlds survive the recording. The water will rise on the 3rd night after all 17 return. Be ready. Signed, Eugene Tibido, 1962, 15 years after he faced the collection. I had been born in 1963. Hands trembling, I played the wax cylinder. My grandfather's voice emerged again. Older now. Wearier. And I understood. The cycle was no myth. It was here. It was always coming for us. Claude, if you're hearing this. Claude, listen carefully. If this reaches you, it means the 17 have already returned. You have 3 nights, only 3, before the water rises. And not a flood like you know, not a surge you can sandbag or outrun. No. This water will rise into the air. Into the trees. Into your very dreams. The boundaries between the bayou and everything else will dissolve like smoke for one night. During that time, the final recordings must be made. The collected will sing the old song. New voices will join them. Some will choose to stay in the water world. Others will return. Your job, your sacred duty, is to make sure those who want to return can find their way back. Claude, the singing woman is not evil. She's necessary. She is the memory of this place, stretching back to when it was all one vast water before the land rose, before the separations. Every culture has a flood myth because every culture remembers. Remembers the time when the waters covered everything. Here in the bayou, that memory is strongest. And the singing woman, she keeps it alive. She keeps the balance between what was and what is. On the 3rd night, gather the 17 at the old cypress grove. You know the one, Claude. Where we used to fish when you were just a boy. Bring recording equipment. Modern equipment, not these brittle old cylinders. The song must be preserved in whatever medium the current generation uses. That's part of the collection. Updating the format of memory. And Claude, some people will be drawn to join them. Don't stop them if they truly want to go. The water world needs new voices every generation, just as our world needs those who remember. The hardest part of your job will be knowing when to let go. I sat in my office until dawn. listening to the rain that had started around midnight. Not a storm. Just a steady, patient rain, like the sky practicing for something bigger. Through my window, I could see the 17 gathered in the parking lot, standing in the rain. Faces turned up to the sky. Mouths open like they were drinking in more than just water. The second day after their return, the 17 began to change, more noticeably now. Their eyes developed a thin film, like a nictitating membrane you see on alligators. They could stay underwater for impossible lengths of time. Robert Hebert was clocked at 43 minutes during an impromptu test by the FBI. Most disturbing, they started speaking in harmony without meaning to. Their voices layering into that same strange singing even during normal conversation. Agent Donnelly wanted them quarantined. Agent Santos wanted them studied. But I knew from my grandfather's journal that trying to contain them would be like trying to contain the tide itself. You all don't understand, I told the federal agents in my office. This ain't a disease or a crime. It's something that's been happening here longer than Louisiana's been a state, longer than America's been a country. Sheriff Tibido, Agent Donnelly snapped, patience fraying, we have 17 American citizens who were missing and have returned with unexplained physiological changes. They're talking about floods, about people choosing to live underwater. This is clearly a mental health crisis, possibly brought on by some unknown toxin in the swamp. Then explain the recordings, I challenged. New ones appearing on phones with no power, locked in evidence. He couldn't. Nobody could. But that didn't stop them from trying to impose federal authority on something that predated the very concept of federal anything. That afternoon, 3 more people walked into the swamp. Not vanished. Not abducted. Walked, in full view of their families. Fully conscious. Fully aware. They just walked into the water and didn't come back up. The first was Adelaide Brossard. Not young Adelaide from 1947, but her granddaughter, also named Adelaide. 73 years old. Terminal cancer. She left a note. Grandma always said the water could heal anything if you were brave enough to breathe it. I'm ready to be brave. The second was a 10-year-old boy named Marcus Dupont, deaf since birth. His mama said he woke up that morning claiming he could hear singing, the most beautiful singing coming from the swamp. She tried to stop him, but he slipped away during lunch and walked straight into Bayou Black. The third was Deputy Beaumean's son. I had sent him home the night before, told him to get some rest. But his wife called me around 3 p.m., hysterical. Beau had been standing in their backyard, staring at the retention pond behind their house, and then just walked in. She said he looked peaceful, even smiled at her before going under. I rushed to their house with a dive team. But the retention pond was only 6 feet deep, and we could see every inch of the bottom. No Beau. His wife showed me his phone, got a new recording, in his voice. Sheriff, I'm sorry. But I've been hearing it my whole life, that singing. My mayor used to tell me stories about the water people, the ones who chose to go back to the old way. I thought they were just stories. But when I heard those cylinders, when I heard that song, I recognized it, that I've been dreaming it since I was a child. The 17 need witnesses from our side. They need someone to record from a different perspective. I volunteered. The FBI wanted to drain the pond. I had to physically stand between them and the excavation equipment they'd brought in. You drain that pond, you might kill him, I said. Wherever he is, he's alive. And he chose this. Sheriff, you're talking about people breathing water. That's physically impossible. So are recordings appearing on dead phones, I shot back, but here we are. That night, I couldn't sleep. I drove out to the old cypress grove my grandfather had mentioned, the place where we'd fished when I was young. It was a sacred spot, the locals said. Where the Homa Indians used to perform ceremonies. The trees were ancient, their knees rising from the water like prayers made of wood. The 17 were already there. Standing in the water up to their waists, humming that alien harmony. As I watched, the water around them began to glow. Phosphorescent plankton, maybe, or something else. The glow spread outward in ripples, and where it touched, I could see through the water like it was glass. And there were people down there. Not corpses. People walking on the bottom of the bayou like it was dry land. I saw Beau, his uniform replaced with something that looked woven from Spanish moss and fish scales. I saw Marcus, the deaf boy, conducting a chorus of people I didn't recognize. Some were dressed in modern clothes. Others in styles from decades past. A few wore what looked like Native American regalia. And some wore nothing but the water itself, shaped into almost human forms. Mon Dieu, I breathed. And Tyler heard me. Sheriff, he said without turning. Tomorrow night the water rises. Your grandpa left instructions, didn't he? How did you know? He's down there. Tyler pointed to the water. Eugene Tibido. He's been waiting. He says you're doing good. But tomorrow we'll test you. Some will choose water. Some will choose land. You have to let them choose. Tyler, what happens to those who go into the water? Where do they go? Tyler turned to look at me. And in the phosphorescent glow, I could see straight through his eyes into something vast and ancient behind them. They go home, Sheriff. To the first home. Before we crawled onto land, before we grew lungs, we were water things. The singing woman, she remembers. She keeps the door open for those who want to return. It's not death. It's just a different kind of life. And the recordings? Stories have to be told, Sheriff. History has to be remembered, but not just human history. The history of the water. The land. The things that existed before words. We are translating it into sound because that's what you can understand. But down there, stories are told in currents. In temperature changes. In the dance of sediment. I thought about all the missing persons cases that were never solved in the parish. All the people who'd vanished into the swamp over the generations. How many are down there? Thousands, Tyler said simply. Going back to before the French, before the Spanish, before anyone kept count. Every culture that's lived here has contributed voices to the song. That's why Louisiana sounds like nowhere else. We're singing with the voices of the drowned, the chosen, the remembered. The third day dawned strange. The air was thick. Thicker than usual, even for Louisiana summer. The barometric pressure was wrong. My joints ached like a storm was coming. But the sky was clear. Animals were spooked. Every dog in the parish howled. Birds flew in circles, confused. The gators had all gone deep, invisible even in the shallow waters where they usually sunned. The FBI had called in more resources. The National Guard had been quietly mobilized. They thought they were dealing with a mass hysteria event, maybe a suicide cult. They had no idea what was really coming. I spent the day preparing. I gathered every recording device I could find. Digital recorders. Cameras. Phones. Even an old reel-to-reel I found in the evidence room. If my grandfather was right, the song needed to be preserved in modern formats. I also prepared boats, ropes, flotation devices, anything that might help people who wanted to come back find their way. As the sun set, the 17 began walking toward the cypress grove. They didn't coordinate. Didn't communicate. Just all started moving at the same time. The FBI tried to stop them, but anyone who touched them got shocked. Not electrically, but something like it. Agent Donnelly grabbed Amy Dupp's arm and immediately let go, his hand covered in what looked like fish scales that faded after a few seconds. I convinced the feds to just follow. To observe. We formed a procession, the 17 in front, then law enforcement, then townsfolk who'd been drawn by something they couldn't explain. By the time we reached the grove, there were maybe 200 people there. The water was already wrong. It stood higher than it should, defying gravity, forming walls of water that held their shape without falling. As the 17 waded in, the water rose to meet them, wrapping around them like a living thing. And then, the singing started. Not just from the 17. But from the water itself. Every voice that had ever joined the singing woman's chorus, all harmonizing in a language older than human speech. The recording devices I'd brought all turned on by themselves, capturing something that shouldn't have been able to be captured. The water rose, not flooding, but lifting. It formed columns. Arches. Impossible architecture made of liquid. And I knew, the third night had begun. And in that shimmering architecture of water, we could see something we were never meant to see. The other side. The bayou, but not the bayou as we knew it. A reflection, a twin world carved from currents and tides. Cities built not from stone and steel, but from shell and bone. Markets where vendors stood half human, half fish, their bodies glimmering in scales, their eyes deep as tide pools. Roads were not dirt or asphalt, but streams, channels of rushing current carrying life along their invisible paths. Buildings rose and spun like whirlpools, spiraling towers of liquid motion that bent reality itself. And then, Tyler's voice cut through the overwhelming song that filled the air, stronger than thunder, clearer than a church bell. Choose. And people did. Adelaide Brossard's granddaughter, frail from cancer, her body bowed and broken by years of pain, stepped forward. And as she crossed the threshold, her posture straightened. Her shoulders lifted. Her breath deepened. She looked back at us once, her smile radiant, and then she dove into a column of water that didn't fall, but climbed upward into the sky. We saw her change. Not into something grotesque, not into something monstrous. But into something graceful. Her body stretched, elongated with elegance. Her skin shimmered with a pearlescent glow, glowing like moonlight on oyster shells. And then she was gone, swimming upward into that impossible column, vanishing into the unknown world on the other side. Marcus was next. His mother held his hand, trembling, but he was already changing. Gills were opening along his neck, like fragile petals blooming. She pressed her lips to his forehead, kissed him goodbye, and then, she let go. The boy laughed, pure, unshaken joy, and ran into the water as if it had always been his home. He disappeared beneath the surface, but his laughter lingered in the air, echoing, impossible to forget. But not everyone chose the water. Out of nearly 200 souls gathered there that night, only 30 stepped into that other world. The rest of us stood rooted in place, witnesses. Rememberers. Carriers of the story. And then, Beau appeared. Yes. Deputy Beau Meanson. My deputy. My friend. He emerged inside one of those glowing water columns, and I swear, he looked healthier than I had ever seen him. Strong. Whole. His uniform was gone, replaced by something otherworldly, some blend of coral and electricity that shimmered as if alive. In his hand, he held what looked like technology, but not like anything we'd ever built. Coral mixed with circuitry, powered by electric eels. And he was recording, still doing his duty, still a deputy. He looked at me, raised a hand, and mouthed, "Thank you." Then he turned, documenting something behind him, some kind of celebration, some kind of ceremony. And that's when the singing reached its peak. The harmony, already overwhelming, swelled into something vast. And from the center of the grove, something rose. Something ancient. Something that could never truly be contained in words. The singing woman. But she wasn't really a woman at all. She was an echo of femininity, a suggestion of shape, woven from water and sound and memory. She was ancient beyond measure. Beautiful in the way a hurricane is beautiful. Terrible in the way the deep ocean is terrible. Her presence was vast, infinite, unstoppable. She had no face, but somehow, she looked at each of us. Into each of us. And when she spoke, it wasn't words, it was meaning itself, pouring directly into our bones, translated by our fragile human minds into something like language. The collection is complete. The stories are preserved. The balance is maintained. She continued. In another generation, when the waters warm beyond measure, when the land forgets its shape, we will call again. Some of you will remember this night as a dream. Others will carry it as truth. Both are correct. The Bayou remembers everything, dreams and truth alike. And then her gaze, if you could call it that, landed on me. I felt the weight of every sheriff before me, generations of guardians who had stood in this same place, facing the threshold between two worlds. Her voice filled me. Guardian of the threshold. Keeper of the peace between worlds. Your line has served well. Continue to stand. Continue to translate. Continue to protect both shores. The recordings will help others understand when the time comes for understanding. And then, as quickly as it had risen, it was gone. The water fell back, slapping into its ordinary level. The architecture of liquid and light dissolved. The 17 stood there in the grove, dazed but calm. The 30 who had chosen water were gone. Yet their families could still feel them. Not dead. Not lost. Alive. Just elsewhere. The FBI agents stood slack-jawed, their expensive equipment humming with hours of footage they couldn't comprehend. Agent Donnelly turned to me, his voice trembling between awe and fear. What do we tell Washington? The truth, I said flatly. That there was a mass hallucination event caused by swamp gas. That the missing persons cases are closed, bodies unrecoverable. That Terrebonne Parish should be monitored, but is currently stable. That's not the truth, he whispered. It's the truth they can handle, I told him. The real truth, that was sealed in the recordings. Waiting for the ones who would need it. When the time was right. But I'll tell you this, the aftermath was harder than the night itself. How do you return to normal after watching 30 people, including your deputy and 3 children, choose to breathe water instead of air? How do you file reports that pacify federal agencies while protecting truths too vast, too fragile, to be dissected by bureaucracy? The 17 stayed with us for another week. They helped us understand. They were different now, more human than they had been when they first emerged, but still carrying something in their eyes. Something eternal. Something that wasn't entirely ours anymore. Tyler Gray, especially, became my anchor. He spent hours with me, translating the recordings into something resembling narrative. These aren't just history, he explained as whale song tones mixed with jazz funeral rhythms from the playback machine. They're instructions. They're blueprints. He told me the water world wasn't separate, it wasn't another dimension. It was here. Always here. Just experienced differently. Like a bird and a fish living in the same space, but never crossing paths. And Bo? The others? I asked. They're still breathing, Tyler said. Doesn't matter if it's air or water, it's all oxygen. Their bodies shifted. Evolution in reverse. Or maybe sideways. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was Bo standing clear as daylight. Not in uniform, but in some woven garb of cypress root and moss. He was in what looked like a courtroom made of mud and roots, presenting evidence. Still a deputy. Still a protector. Just for a different jurisdiction now. The FBI left with thousands of hours of recordings. Before Donnelly drove away, he pulled me aside. Sheriff Tibido, he said. I've been with the Bureau 15 years. I've seen things that don't make the reports. But this is beyond classification. What do you want me to do? File it under unexplained phenomena. Cross-reference the 1947 case if you can dig it up. Recommend minimal federal involvement. This parish has been handling it for generations. We'll keep handling it. And if it happens again, he asked. When it happens again, I corrected. My family will still be here. We'll still be the bridge. He shook my hand, and I saw something in his eyes, something that told me he'd be back one day. Not as an agent, but as a man seeking answers to questions he couldn't stop asking. Agent Santos left her card. On the back she had written, "The water remembers everything. Some of us are just learning to listen." And I believed her. The families of those who chose water responded in their own ways. Some mourned, as if their loved ones had died. Others celebrated, as if they had moved far away to start a new life. Marcus's mother began recording messages for her son on her phone, updates about her day, lullabies from his childhood. Sometimes she swore she received messages back. Recordings she hadn't made. Recordings of Marcus. His voice telling her about songs sung in frequencies beyond human hearing. Adelaide's family brought me something I'll never forget, a painting she'd done in 1952, 5 years after her first return. It showed the cypress grove, the water rising. And in the background, barely visible, an old woman walking into a column of water. The face was unmistakable. It was Adelaide, as she would look decades later, at 73, dying of cancer. She knew, her daughter said. Grandmere knew her whole life she would go back. She painted it before I was even born. The recordings consumed me after that. Not just the new ones, but the wax cylinders from 1947, and even older ones. I found reels in the Terrebonne Historical Society from the 1920s. I uncovered a diary from 1863, describing 17 people vanishing into the water during the chaos of the Civil War. It was always 17. Always the same pattern. 3 months after the collection, I received a visitor. Dr. Camille Fontenot from LSU's Anthropology Department. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, carrying the kind of intelligence that cuts through fog. "Sheriff," she said, settling into my office. "I've studied the recordings you sent. I've also been studying similar phenomena worldwide. The sirens of Greece. The Slavic Rusalka. The Scottish Kelpies. They all describe the same thing, points where the boundary between water and air-breathing life grows thin. You're saying this happens elsewhere?" I asked. "Yes. But here, in Louisiana, especially in this parish, it's unique. It's regular. It's civil. Most of the world's water-being stories are violent. But here, it's symbiotic." She unrolled a map dotted with marks around the globe. And Louisiana's coast glowed with density, Terrebonne Parish the brightest cluster of all. "Why here?" I whispered. "Because this is where the Gulf meets the continent most gently," she explained. "The boundary between land and water is blurred here. Miles of marsh that are neither fully land nor fully water. The whole ecosystem is liminal. And when the land is liminal, other boundaries thin as well. Together we built what we called the archive. Every recording, properly preserved, properly catalogued. We turned the old evidence room into a climate-controlled vault, with multiple copies stored across formats. The 17 helped, their memories sharpened by something beyond human. They could recall details ordinary minds would forget. And Tyler became my bridge. My liaison. He could still hear them. The ones who had gone under. Through him, families left messages. And responses came back, always at 3:33 a.m., as recordings on their phones. And then, 6 months after the collection, something happened none of us expected. 3 of the 30 who had chosen the water, returned. Not permanently. Just visiting. They walked out of the bayou beneath the glow of the full moon. At first glance, they looked unchanged, the same faces, the same bodies that had vanished into the waters months before. But then, you saw their eyes. Those eyes weren't human anymore, they held depths that stretched on forever, like staring into the ocean itself, infinite, ancient, unknowable. They told us they couldn't stay long. A few hours at most. But they needed their families to know the truth. They were happy. They were whole. They were part of something vast, something beautiful. And then, I saw him. Beau. He found me at the station, dripping with Bayou water that clung to him like a second skin, water that somehow never seemed to make anything wet. "Sheriff," he said. And his voice, it was no longer just his voice. It carried harmonics, like multiple versions of him speaking in chorus, layered with echoes from another world. "I need to show you something." He led me back to the cypress grove, to the water's edge where this all began. There, he pulled out a strange device, a recorder carved from polished driftwood and mother-of-pearl, shimmering like something alive. "The water world has its own archives," Beau said. "Memories stretching back to the very first humans who settled here, and even before them. The singing woman wants to share them with you. Trade, she calls it. Your stories, for ours." He pressed the device, and suddenly, history came alive in sound. I heard the founding of New Orleans, not from the mouths of men, but from the perspective of the water itself, displaced and reshaped. I heard the Civil War echoing through the swamps, the battles poisoning whole stretches of marsh. I heard oil spills ripping through the bayou like plagues in their world, a sickness that scarred generations beneath the water. But I also heard joy. Celebrations when the rivers ran clean again. The laughter of hybrid children, born to walk in both worlds, air and water. The ancient treaties forged between the Homa people and the ones below, pacts that settlers never knew existed. Beau looked at me. "This is just a taste," he said. "There's more, thousands of years of memory. But it needs translating. Interpreting. That's why the collections happen. To refresh the language. To keep the stories alive." "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. And then he said something that froze me. "Because the next collection won't wait a full generation. The waters are warming faster than ever. The boundaries are thinning. Maybe 20 years, maybe less. Your successor needs to be ready." "My successor?" I laughed bitterly. "Beau, I don't have a successor. I don't even have kids." Beau smiled then, a sad, knowing smile. For just a moment, he looked completely human again. "You will," he whispered. "A daughter. She'll be sheriff after you. She's already chosen. Just not born yet." Before I could say another word, he stepped back into the water. And with one stride, he was gone. A year later, Caroline, my wife, told me she was pregnant. We'd been trying for 10 years. 10 years of disappointment. 10 years of false hope. We'd given up. But somehow, after the collection, it happened. Our daughter came into this world during a thunderstorm that flooded half the parish. The nurse swore she'd never seen a newborn so calm. While lightning split the sky and the hospital shook with thunder, she just stared at the rain streaking the window. Like she was listening to a song only she could hear. We named her Melody. Melody Tibido. Future Sheriff of Terrebonne Parish. Keeper of the Threshold. Guardian of the Archives. But the recordings didn't stop. They multiplied. New ones began appearing, not just from the 17 who'd returned or the 30 who'd chosen water, but from others. From people who'd always heard the singing without knowing what it meant. From children dreaming in languages older than humanity itself. From the elderly who remembered stories their grandparents swore were true, stories of the ones beneath the water. And now, I catalogued them all. Every story. Every song. Every impossible memory. Because that's my duty. Not just to keep the peace in Terrebonne Parish. But to safeguard the archive that proves we were never the only ones here. The FBI tried to bury it. They classified everything. But classification doesn't mean erasure. The evidence exists. The recordings exist. And more importantly, the connection exists. Growing stronger every single year as the waters rise, as the boundaries thin. Tyler tells me the 17 have started hearing new songs, frequencies no human ear has known before. The singing woman is preparing for something bigger than a collection. Something not just about water rising, but water reclaiming. Not in violence. Not in destruction. But in inevitability. Because water always finds its level. One night, standing at the bayou with Tyler as the sun sank behind the cypress, I asked him, will humanity survive this? He just smiled. Humanity? Sure. But maybe not the way you're thinking. Evolution isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes, it's about remembering. Remembering what you were, before you forgot how to breathe underwater. And I think about that. I think about Beau, down there in his courthouse beneath the cypress roots, still serving as a deputy sheriff, just in a different jurisdiction. I think about Marcus. The deaf boy who now hears frequencies beyond anything human. I think about Adelaide, painting prophecies in the water world just as her grandmother once painted them on land. And I think about my daughter, Melody. 5 years old now. Sometimes she stands at the edge of the bayou and hums songs I don't recognize. Songs that make the air shimmer around her. Caroline wants us to leave. Wants to take Melody somewhere far from the water. Somewhere safe. But I know there's no running. The waters will rise everywhere. At least here, we have guides. We have the archives. We have the songs. Beau figured out a way to encode the recordings everywhere. In coral growth patterns. In the migration paths of fish. Even in the DNA of bacteria thriving in the blurred waters between salt and fresh. The story will survive, Tyler told me. Even if the form changes, the story continues. Late at night, when the station is silent, I sit in my office and listen. I play the recordings in order, one after the other. From the earliest wax cylinders to the latest files that appear on our servers without explanation. And if you really listen, if you let yourself fall into them, you begin to hear it. The meta-narrative. The larger story. It's not a story of invasion. Not of conquest. Not even of replacement. It's a story of reunion. Land and water were one once. Before the great separations. Before our minds divided the world into categories, us and them, wet and dry, human and other. The singing woman remembers that unity. Every collection is her way of keeping it alive. Her way of ensuring that reunion is always possible. In 2019, 17 people disappeared into the bayous of Terrebonne Parish. They came back. Changed, but alive. 30 more chose water. Chose to breathe below. They're still there, still alive, still part of the song. And the next collection? It's coming sooner than we thought. The waters rise. The boundaries thin. The song grows louder every day. When it happens, Melody will be old enough. Old enough to understand. Maybe even old enough to lead. Because that's how it works here in Terrebonne Parish. We live between worlds. Between water and land. Between memory and forgetting. We keep the archives. We maintain the recordings. We guard the threshold. Not because we're chosen. Not because we're special. But because someone has to. Someone has to stand witness when the boundaries blur. Someone has to translate between those who breathe air and those who breathe water. Someone has to remember that once, long ago, we all came from the water. And maybe, someday, we'll all return. The recordings are there, waiting. For those who hear the singing but don't understand. For those who dream of breathing water and wake up gasping. For those in the future who need to know this has happened before, and will happen again. The bayou remembers everything. And now, thanks to the archive. So do we. End recording. Sheriff Claude Tibido, Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana. December, 2019. Archive note. This is one of 3,847 recordings currently stored in the Terrebonne Parish collection. Access requires approval from the current threshold guardian. The water continues to rise. The song continues to play. The archive continues to grow. Some stories never end. They just go deeper.